Hello, Frizzle folks! I have read 9 books and written the names of them on these slips of paper, and I am going to be pulling them out in 3 rounds of 3. And in each round I have to make a choice. Which one would I reread, which one would I rewrite, and which book would I recycle? Let's get started with round 1! First grave on the right. Honestly, that one was a little disappointing. The Lost Medal. A much larger disappointment. Murder at Haven's Rock. Okay. I hate this. Well, I have to rewrite The Lost Medal. It's the one I have the most passionate rewriting thoughts on. The Lost Medal is book 7 of the Mistborn series, and I really loved a lot of the Mistborn books, particularly the most recent ones. And then we have the really most recent one, The Lost Medal, and it was such a disappointment. And most of my anger toward The Lost Medal can be summarized in one topic. The 𝐂𝐸�H𝐿𝐒. So the 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐒 is a collection of books. Inside the 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐒 you have like the Mistborn series or the Stormlight Archive or Warbreaker, lots of different books by the same author. And then these books slightly interconnect until the Lost Medal. Instead of the interconnection of the 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐒 world building being like in the background of the story, but at the core of the story you have like awesome character moments and cool plot twists. This book reversed that. And it felt like at the forefront of the story, instead now we have all of the world building and the 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐒 connections, and then in the background, oh yeah, we were supposed to have a character arc, right? So, for the rewrite, if you want lots of details and spoilers, I do have an entire video on the Lost Medal where I go into detail on some of these ideas, and I will link that video for you in the footnotes of this video. We would either get rid of entirely a bunch of the characters that are from other books, a bunch of the magic systems that are imported from the other books, all of those world building details, like, just throw them out. Or we could remix them a little bit to make them better. Because a lot of these 𝐂𝐸𝐿𝐒 characters that are coming from other books and other worlds, they are unknown people, irrelevant to the plot of Mistborn. But this character in the story that's giving us all of the world building info dumps doesn't have to be a stranger. There's a character in this book that's a pretty good candidate that is important to the Mistborn world, a fan favorite, and would have an interesting character dilemma working with the main characters of this book. So that's how I would rewrite The Lost Medal, but I fully acknowledge that this is a matter of personal taste. Like, obviously, all opinions about books are like a matter of personal taste, but this one especially, because there are lots, and I mean lots, of fans of the Mistborn books that loved The Lost Medal. I just, unfortunately, wasn't one of those. So I gave The Lost Medal 3 stars. And its book tone is Gainsborough Grey. Book tone is a reader personality test that I designed. If you want to learn more about that, you can go find that in the footnotes. But Gainsborough Grey means that it's an intellectual book that's about equally split of plot, character, and atmosphere focus. Okay, then we have 2 books that I have very little interest in rereading left. I'm going to recycle Murder at Haven's Rock. Me and this novel got off on the wrong foot. This is a contemporary murder mystery that takes place in Alaska / the Yukon Territory. And I'm from Alaska. I didn't even wear this sweatshirt on purpose, I swear. That's just a fun coincidence. And this book's first mistake was telling me what time of year it was in Alaska, because that immediately gave me a lot of information I needed to judge all of the inaccuracies in this book, like the nature of snowmelt and how if it's May and there's still patches of snow on the ground, all the places that there aren't snow is mud, period. So me and this book got off on the wrong foot, but I tried really hard to forgive it and just appreciate the murder mystery for what it was. But the mystery was boring and I couldn't feel the stakes and the characters were bland and I just didn't care about the book by the end. The only thing left was the burning ember of irritation. So I gave this book 2 stars. And its book tone is New York Pink, which means it's intellectual and plot focused. Which leads me to reread First Grave on the Right. This is part of the Charlie Davidson series, a series which I've read 2 other books in, and I loved those 2 other books. But then I've had this long break, and now I'm circling back to read book 1, First Grave on the Right. This book is modern day with a little bit of fantasy. Our main character is a private investigator, and also a Grim Reaper. She sees ghosts and helps them resolve their emotional issues so they can pass on to the other side. And this book is trying so hard to be funny. And when I read books 3 and 4 months ago, I felt like it was succeeding. But when I was reading book 1, I felt like it was failing. Failing spectacularly. I was so annoyed at it. And I don't really think that the humor style has changed much from book to book in this series. I think it's more me, that I didn't realize until I picked up this book how much my personal mood would make a difference and whether or not I thought these books were just okay or whether I loved them. So I do want to continue the series, and I would even be open to rereading book 1, but not until I'm really in the mood for this kind of sassy, motor mouth, absurdist, sometimes slapstick kind of humor. One of the other curious things is when I started this series with book 3, I was floored by the beginning of that book, that it was starting out kind of confusing and ridiculous and wild. And I thought to myself, this would probably make a lot more sense if I had already read book 1. But book 1 starts with the exact same energy and resistance to explaining anything for you. So I do think I got a pretty good impression of the series from the first off. I rated First Grave on the Right 3 stars, and its book tone is anchor gray, which means it's an emotional book that is a good mix of plot, character, and atmosphere. Now let's do round 2! I swear there are books that I like in this cup. Lots of them. I'm excited to talk to you about some of these. Now we just hope that it won't be an entire round of all the books I love. We got Down Comes the Night, Middlegame, and the Vorkosigan Saga, books 6, 8, 7.1, 10, 11, 12, and 12.1. You might be able to tell which one of these is a series I've been binging. Okay, easiest decision first. It's not even a competition. The reread has to go to the Vorkosigan books. I mean, 2 of the books on this piece of paper were rereads. Books 8 and 7.1 I read like 2 months ago and then reread again now. The Vorkosigan Saga is my new favorite series. It's tied for first place, admittedly, with a lot of other series, but right now it is my obsession, my everything. I am in love with these books, and I am so excited to keep reading the series because there's lots of books in here. It's a sci-fi series with a good handful of books. So far, I've been reading all of the books narrated by one character named Miles, a guy who dreams of gaining fame and respect and sometimes goes to incredibly great lengths in order to try to achieve this, and oftentimes doesn't quite hit the mark there. And if you want to hear me blab about the plot of these books or why I love every individual book in this series, I'm making videos about everything, and I will link that playlist in the footnotes for you. But I think I'm just going to take a moment here to talk about what makes these books so rereadable. For a book series to be successful in my mind, you have to have all of the books interconnect. Like, there has to be some extra joy that comes from the books building on each other. But also, every individual book still has to be a satisfying reading experience. It's not like you can just write one really long book and then split it up into a bunch of different sections. No, every individual book has to be its own awesome work of art. And this series nails that dichotomy. And it's so impressive because the internal chronology of the series, like the order that you're supposed to read the books in, is not the order that the books were written in. Every time I look at the order that these books were actually written in, I am floored. Because some of these books go so well together. Like, they feel like halves of a whole. And of course one of them is going to lead right into the other one, and you can't separate them because they really echo each other and answer thematic questions. And then when you're looking at the publication order, you realize that one was written early and one was written late, and they're separated by 8 years and like 5 books. And I think that just shows how strong the character arcs and progressions are in these books. In each novel, our main character of Miles goes through some sort of change. He grows in a new way. And then the next book will always pick up with him in that new spot. There isn't any backtracking. He doesn't unlearn his lessons. And then it brings him by the end of the book to a new spot. And then the next book can start there. And this makes such a satisfying reading experience because throughout the course of the series, the Miles from the beginning and the Miles from the end, I'm not quite to the end yet, but where I'm currently at book 12, are such different characters, and yet you get to see exactly how he got through every single step there. And there's still room in this series for more books inserted. Yes, please, if you, the author, ever want to write more. Because there's plenty of time skips where Miles matures some in the meantime, where you could slide in a book focusing on that part of him maturing. I rated every single one of these books 5 stars. Except for the one novella, book 12.1 Winter Fair Gifts. I gave that only 4 stars, but I still love these ones. And their book tone is uranium blue, which means intellectual, character focused. Okay, what are our decisions again? I've completely forgotten in my storm of talking about the Vorkosigan Saga. Okay, we have Middlegame versus Down Comes the Night. And here's the thing about rewriting these. Middlegame wasn't necessarily the book for me, and I could twist it in ways that would make it more to my taste. But I don't really want to because I respect it so much for going all in on what it wanted to do. So I think we're going to have to talk about rewriting Down Comes the Night. This is a fantasy romance novel with parts enemies to lovers and parts gothic haunted mansion mystery vibes. Our heroine and her love interest are on opposite sides of a war, but then they're both independently brought into the orbit of this creepy mansion, and they have to make an uneasy alliance because they both want to solve the mysteries there. And the one thing that most needs to be rewritten about this book is the threat levels, is the clarity of what could go wrong, of we've got all these different villains, and what are they actually going to do to our characters if they slip up? What is actually the danger level of all these situations? Because when I was reading the book, there's definitely lots of moments when our characters are in danger. Are they just in danger of like offending their host? Or are they in danger right now of dying in a torturous way? And in a lot of moments, it was kind of unclear of how serious the danger was or where it was coming from, which did add to the suspense. But I think you can keep that suspense while also better clarifying, okay, what is that danger? You know? So is this danger level like you'll be fired from your job, or is this danger level like you're going to be tried and killed for treason? And there were just so many moments in this book that I didn't know, and I really wanted and needed that to be spelled out for me. But there's a lot that I really liked about Down Comes the Night, including the romance and the voice of our narrator. And if you want more thoughts, I read this in a reading vlog challenge thing, and I'll link that in the footnotes. And then we have recycling Middlegame. Middlegame is the tale of twins Roger and Dodger, separated at birth, but not quite separated enough because they develop a psychic link to be able to communicate with each other and additional interesting powers as they grow into them. And the evil scientists that created Roger and Dodger are very carefully trying to manipulate them to access the powers of the universe and make the evil scientists like the gods controller people. This book feels like if you took part Wizard of Oz and part Dickensian steampunk vibes and part like 90s horror thriller vibes and you threw them in a blender, then you might get something that was approaching the genius of this book. At the core of this book, you have the oftentimes rocky relationship of these twins. And then if you get further bigger and bigger, you have the world is at stake and you guys have powers that no one really understands. And the novel is sometimes told like non-sequentially, so you'll get snippets of the end of the book interspersed through the beginning and middle of the book. And I liked this book, but I didn't love it. And I think the reason for that is by the end, the motivations and the plans of the characters felt kind of wishy-washy. Like they were just trying things out randomly and hoping that that would work to vanquish the evil. And Middlegame works really well as a book club discussion. And I know this because my book club, the Frizzle Fantasy Fish, read this together and it was so much fun. There's definitely a lot to talk about in this book. If you would like to join the book club, it is only $2 a month. We are reading this book next. Now, before we get into our round 3, we do have, unfortunately, a dishonorable mention. The dishonorable mention section is for books that I started reading and then gave up on really quick, and I feel like I don't know them well enough to give a coherent review for them, so we're just giving them a little mention. Fire of the Forebears. This is an epic fantasy novel, and I just found both of our point of view characters so boring. Like, we were always just glazing over their emotional reactions or what motivated them, and I just couldn't click with anything. Now we are in for round 3. We've got The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, a book that I liked, but I don't think would be as good on a reread. 9 Liars, a book that I liked less. And Small Miracles. We've got to rewrite 9 Liars. I have a bone to pick with it. Like, there is one thing that could just be taken out of this book / changed, and I would be so happy. 9 Liars is the 5th book in the Stevie Bell series. This series is half murder mysteries and half teenage drama. The reason I keep reading these books is for the murder mysteries. I think it is done well, and I think in 9 Liars, it's done better than it has ever been done before. Of all of the books in the Stevie Bell series, this book has the best murder mystery. I think it has really finally nailed that pacing and the clues and the feeling of danger. It was just great. However, the teenage drama is the worst it's ever been. And I think I'm done with the series. Even though the murder mystery parts keep getting better, I cannot stand of the romances. Because Stevie, our main character, has a boyfriend. Has had a boyfriend, in fact, for many books, and I hate him so much. He is a jerk, he is manipulative, he doesn't care about Stevie's feelings, so I would rewrite this book either by cutting him out of the book completely, which I think would be my preference, but we could also give our main character Stevie a character arc where she grows in self-confidence and she realizes that this boy doesn't deserve her and dumps him. And I know that sounds pretty vindictive, but really every time he is mentioned or on screen, I am dying inside, and he's gotta go. I rated 9 Liars 3 stars, and its book tone is vermilion red, which means emotional and plot focus. And then we have Small Miracles versus the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and I gave these both 4 stars, but we gotta throw out one of them. And definitely the less rereadable of the two is the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Because this book is a twisty murder mystery, and once you know the answer to the mystery, I'm not sure how magical this book will be. It takes place in an isolated manor house in England in the early 1900s. But it also has time loops and body-snatching, possessing entities in that time loop, and a race and a deadly competition to solve the murder mystery. Honestly, I loved this book, and I've made an entire review video gushing about it. We'll link it in the footnotes. And I know that the premise sounds intimidating. It sounds confusing. But this book is so good at not being confusing. It is honestly the most impressive thing about it. It's got a lot of impressive things about this book. I think it's a masterpiece at what it set out to do. Even the mystery part wrapped up very nicely. So I would highly recommend this book to people looking for weird and fascinating murder mysteries. I gave the 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle 4 stars, and its book tone is New York pink, which means it's intellectual and plot focused. And our last book, Small Miracles, for the reread. Small Miracles follows the angel Gaedriel in modern-day London. And Gaedriel, alas, is a fallen angel who has rebelled against heaven because they believe that people should be allowed to have fun every now and then, to eat a piece of chocolate, even if it's technically a sin. So Gaedriel has become the angel of petty temptations, trying to get people to live their life a little bit funner. And in this book, Gaedriel is given the task of lightening the life of a certain woman who is such a stick in the mud. And in the process, Gaedriel gets to know her and her niece that she's taking care of, and helping both of their lives by helping them both understand what it means to manipulate people by giving them a little bit of incentive. This is one of those cozy books that is oftentimes pretty low stakes. I was feeling kind of middle of the road, 3 stars about this book until the end, and the end was just so cute that it single-handedly propelled this book into the 4-star range. It's got a sweet little love story for Gaedriel and character arcs about overcoming grief and finding the joy in the little things of life for our other characters. There are some nice angel politics showdowns, but most of it is just this slice of life of Gaedriel struggling to get people to find that joy. And I read Small Miracles because it's one of the finalists in the Spiffbo competition, the self-published fantasy blog-off. I've decided to read all of the finalists in this competition this year and rank them for myself, and some of them have been really good. And some of them were our dishonorable mention of this video. But overall, I'm having a lot of fun with these books. I rated Small Miracles 4 stars, and its book tone is Resolution Blue, which means emotional and character-focused. And those are the books I read recently. Thank you so much for watching, and a big shout out thank you to my patrons. If you want to leave me an emoji, leave me a spaceship emoji, because my favorite reads of the month were definitely the Vorkosigan novels.